My beloved child, listen carefully, because what I am about to reveal is not symbolic, not distant, and not meant for someone else. This message has found you because heaven has already marked this moment on your timeline. Right now, as you are listening, something you could not see, something you could not name, something that has quietly worked against you for a long time is collapsing under divine command. This is not poetry. This is not motivation. This is a report from the unseen realm. A powerful enemy is collapsing right now, and heaven wants you to understand why this is happening, how it was hidden from you, and what Archangel Michael has already been instructed to do on your behalf. You may have sensed it before this moment. A strange pressure lifting, an unexplainable pause in the resistance, a silence where there used to be constant tension. That was not coincidence. That was not your imagination. While your days looked ordinary on the surface, angels were moving with precision behind the veil. Orders were released. Assignments were shifted. Lines that could not be crossed before were suddenly broken. And the reason this feels intense is because this is not the beginning of a battle. This is the exposure of an ending. Hear this clearly. The enemy collapsing is not always the one you expected. Heaven often allows familiarity to blind the target, because what is familiar feels safe, even when it is slowly draining your strength. This enemy hid in repetition. It hid in patterns. It hid in thoughts you assumed were your own. And because it never announced itself loudly, you learned to live around it, compensate for it, and sometimes even blame yourself for its effects. But heaven has never been confused about its name, its access, or its expiration date. Archangel Michael did not move impulsively. He did not move emotionally. He moved because the legal window closed. There are moments when heaven watches silently, not because it is absent, but because it is allowing evidence to accumulate. Every prayer you whispered when you were tired, every time you chose obedience without applause, every moment you endured without understanding why things felt harder than they should, all of it was recorded. And when the measure was complete, instruction was released. That is why angels are moving now, not later. That is why things are shifting even if no one around you has noticed yet. This message is reaching you because the collapse is already in motion. You are not being warned to prepare. You are being informed to become aware. Awareness is critical now, because when an enemy loses authority, it often attempts confusion as a last tactic. It wants you to believe nothing has changed. It wants you to assume this is another false start. But heaven does not announce endings prematurely. When heaven speaks like this, it is because the outcome is sealed. You need to understand something important. The enemy did not fail because it was weak. It failed because it overstepped. There was a line it crossed recently, one you may not have recognized, but heaven did, and touched something it was never authorized to touch. It interfered with timing it was never permitted to delay. And when that happened, intervention was no longer optional. Archangel Michael was instructed to step forward not just as a defender, but as an enforcer of divine order. This is why the title of this message is not exaggerated. This is why you were ordered to watch completely. Because what is happening behind your back explains things that never made sense to your face. The resistance that seemed personal was never about your flaws. The delays that frustrated you were never punishments. They were containment strategies. Heaven was isolating the threat while preserving you. And now that isolation has become exposure. Right now, in the unseen realm, what once spoke loudly hath been silenced. What once blocked hath been commanded to release. What once circled has been pushed back beyond its boundary. You may not feel victorious yet, and that is okay. Spiritual shifts often register as quiet before they register as celebration. Do not rush to label this moment. Let it settle. Let your spirit catch up with what heaven has already executed. There is a reason your name was spoken in heavenly councils. There is a reason Archangel Michael did not delegate this assignment downward. And there is a reason this collapse is happening without noise. Loud endings invite unnecessary attention. Silent endings protect the next beginning. Heaven is not just removing opposition. It is clearing space. Space for peace that does not require explanation. Space for movement without resistance. Space for clarity without fear. As you continue listening, understand this foundational truth. Nothing that is collapsing now will be able to rebuild itself later. This is not a temporary retreat. This is a dismantling. Piece by piece. Access by access. Influence by influence. And you are being brought into awareness not to fight, but to agree. Agreement with heaven accelerates manifestation in the natural. This is only the opening of what you are being shown. What comes next will explain the name of the enemy, how it attached itself so quietly, and why its collapse will shock you when you finally see it clearly. Beloved one, now that the veil hath been lifted just enough for you to sense what is unfolding, it is important to understand what you could not see while it was happening. Most spiritual conflicts are not loud. They do not announce themselves with chaos or visible signs. They move quietly through routines, thoughts, emotions, and timing. That is why so many people misunderstand spiritual warfare. They assume that if nothing dramatic is happening, nothing significant is taking place. But heaven does not operate on noise. Heaven operates on precision. And what was happening behind your back required silence, not spectacle. There were moments when you felt unusually tired without reason. Days when motivation dipped even though nothing was technically wrong. Seasons where progress felt slower than it should have been, even when you were doing everything right. Those were not failures. Those were indicators. Indicators that something was pressing from the unseen realm, attempting to create friction without being detected. The enemy's greatest advantage was not strength. It was solely. It knew that if it stayed unnamed, it could stay unchallenged. And for a time, it did. But heaven saw every detail. While you were managing your life in the natural, angels were observing patterns forming in the spiritual. They noticed repetition. They noticed cycles that were not meant to repeat. They noticed delays that did not align with divine timing. Nothing escapes that level of observation. And when the pattern was confirmed, instructions were issued, not as an emotional reaction, but as a calculated response. This is where many people misunderstand divine intervention. They imagine angels waiting until things are unbearable. In reality, angels move when legality shifts. When something that was temporarily permitted becomes permanently unauthorized, action is triggered. That shift happened recently for you. Something crossed from tolerance into trespass. And the moment that happened, the atmosphere around your life changed, even if your circumstances had not caught up yet. Archangel Michael's involvement signals something specific. His assignments are not casual. They are not frequent. They are reserved for moments where order must be restored and authority must be enforced. This was not about encouragement. This was about correction. Correction of an imbalance that was never meant to last as long as it did. And correction does not always look gentle at first. Sometimes it looks like disruption in the unseen before it looks like relief in the seen. You were protected from mowing too much too early. That protection mattered. Awareness without authority creates fear. Authority without awareness creates confusion. Heaven waited until both were aligned. Now you are being brought into understanding because the danger has already passed its peak. What remains is adjustment. Adjustment in how you think. Adjustment in what you tolerate. Adjustment in what you no longer blame yourself for. This is also why certain people, conversations, or environments have recently felt different to you. Some no longer have the same pull. Some feel strangely irrelevant. That is not emotional detachment. That is spiritual recalibration. When an enemy loses influence, it often loses access through familiar channels. What once felt normal begins to feel heavy. What once felt necessary begins to feel optional. This is not loss. This is alignment. Now hear this clearly, because this matters. You did not miss your moment. Nothing has been wasted. Delay does not mean denial when heaven is involved. What was slowed was protected. What was postponed was preserved. And what felt like stagnation was actually containment. Heaven was ensuring that when movement resumed, it would not be interrupted again. As you listen to this, I want you to do something simple but powerful. If this message is confirming what you have already felt deep inside, acknowledge it. Like this video, because agreement matters. Share it with someone who have been feeling unexplained resistance, because awareness breaks isolation. Leave a comment, even if it is brief, because spoken recognition anchors spiritual truth. Subscribe to this channel and join the membership if you feel led, because staying connected to messages like this keeps your discernment sharp and your spirit aligned. These actions are not about algorithms alone. They are about positioning. The enemy's collapse does not mean everything instantly becomes perfect. It means opposition no longer has permission. And when permission is revoked, manifestations follow. Sometimes quickly, sometimes progressively, but always surely. What you are stepping into now is not a reward for endurance. It is a return to what should have been flowing all along. Do not underestimate this moment. Many people never realize when the pressure lifts because they are too busy bracing for impact. You are being given insight so you can relax your posture, not tense it. You no longer need to fight for clarity. You need to receive it. You no longer need to prove your worth. You need to walk in it. And there is something else you must know. The collapse you are hearing about is not isolated. It connects to a larger pattern that explains why this enemy chose you in the first place. That revelation is coming, and when you hear it, everything will finally make sense. You will understand why the resistance was personal, why the timing mattered so much, and why heaven refused to intervene halfway. Before you let your attention drift, stay present with this unfolding. What is being revealed next is not commonly spoken about, and it carries a clarity that many people search for but never receive. My precious one, now we come to the part that heaven waited to reveal until the enemy's grip was already broken. What you are about to understand is not meant to create fear, but clarity. Because clarity is power. The enemy that has been working against you did not arrive suddenly. It studied you. It observed your compassion, your sensitivity, your willingness to carry more than you should. It noticed how deeply you feel, how seriously you take responsibility, how easily you blame yourself when things go wrong. And it built a strategy around that. Not to destroy you outright, but to exhaust you quietly. The strategy was simple but effective. It was not about dramatic attacks. It was about slow erosion, convincing you that delays were your fault, whispering that rest was laziness, suggesting that if you just tried harder, things would finally open. Over time, this created internal pressure. You questioned your timing. You questioned your discernment. You questioned whether you were hearing heaven clearly. And the enemy relied on one thing above all else: your silence. Because as long as you internalized the struggle, it could operate without exposure. But here is where it failed. You did not quit. You did not harden your heart. You did not abandon your faith, even when you did not understand the process. That endurance became evidence. Heaven watches endurance closely. Not loud faith, not performative strength, but quiet consistency. Every time you chose integrity over impulse, alignment over anger, patience over panic, something was being documented. And when the record was complete, the enemy's strategy was no longer sustainable. Archangel Michael's involvement marks the moment strategy turned into judgment. Michael does not negotiate with patterns that refuse correction. He enforces boundaries that cannot be appealed. When he stepped forward, it was not to warn the enemy. It was to end its assignment. That is why the collapse feels sudden to you, even though it was prepared over time. Heaven rarely removes something until it has fully exposed its nature. Now there is no confusion about what was happening. And more importantly, there is no permission for it to continue. You may realize now that some of your greatest battles were internal. Not because you were weak, but because the enemy targeted your inner world. If it could control your perception, it could delay your progress without ever touching your external life directly. But that access has been revoked. Thoughts that once looped endlessly will begin to lose their grip. Emotional heaviness that lingered without explanation will begin to lift. This is not because you suddenly became stronger. It is because the pressure source has been removed. Understand this deeply. The enemy did not fail because it underestimated you. It failed because it underestimated heaven's patience. It assumed silence meant absence. It assumed delay meant indifference. It assumed that because nothing happened immediately, nothing would happen at all. That assumption cost it everything. Heaven did not rush, but it never forgets. What you are stepping into now is not just relief, but restoration. Restoration of confidence. Restoration of timing. Restoration of trust in your own discernment. You will notice that decisions begin to feel lighter. Paths begin to open with less resistance. Not because life becomes effortless, but because opposition is no longer strategically placed against you. There is also something important to release right now. Guilt. Guilt for not seeing it sooner. Guilt for tolerating what drained you. Guilt for thinking you should have been stronger. That guilt was never yours to carry. You were not meant to fight what you could not name. And now that it has been named in heaven, it has lost its power on earth. As this truth settles in your spirit, I want you to mark this moment. This is not symbolic. This is intentional. Type "I receive divine clarity" in the comments if this message is speaking directly to your spirit. Blessing code 731 has just been released, marking the end of silent resistance and the beginning of restored flow. What is happening in your life right now is not meant to stop with you. This word is light, and light is meant to travel. When you sow into this mission through super thanks, membership, or PayPal donation found in the description, you are not supporting a channel. You are fueling a river that carries truth to souls who are still confused, still burdened, still fighting enemies they cannot name. I hear the Lord saying, as you release seed into this ground, I will release oil over your life, oil that breaks yokes you did not even know were forming. This is not a casual moment. This is a prophetic response. Obey it quickly. Those who give in alignment will see acceleration, protection, and unexpected provision rise to meet them. Step forward now and seal this moment with action. Beloved child, Now we arrive at the moment that causes the greatest pause in the spirit, because this is where understanding shifts from mystery to revelation. This is where many people feel a quiet shock, not because the truth is dramatic, but because it is familiar. The enemy that has been collapsing was never always external. It did not always arrive as opposition from others. Circumstances were visible barriers. Its most effective form with disguise. And the name that will surprise you is not a person, not a place, and not a single event. It is a pattern that learned how to wear your voice. The enemy's name is misalignment, rooted in distorted self-perception. It operated through a false narrative about who you were, how much you were allowed to receive, and how long you were required to struggle before rest was permitted. It spoke in your inner language. It borrowed your tone. It echoed your past experiences. That is why it was so difficult to confront. You do not fight what you believe is you. This pattern did not begin with malice. It began with survival. At some point in your past, adapting became necessary. You learned to overthink to stay safe. You learned to carry more to avoid disappointment. You learned to question yourself before others could question you. What once protected you quietly became a gate. And the enemy did not create that gate. It occupied it. That is the part that shocks many people. The enemy often does not invent wounds. It exploits unresolved ones. Heaven allowed this to continue only until it threatened your future beyond repair. When survival habits begin to interfere with destiny, intervention becomes necessary. That is when the pattern crossed from tolerated into trespassing. That is when Archangel Michael's involvement became inevitable. Because Michael is not assigned to emotional battles alone. He is assigned to authority breaches. And this pattern began to interfere with assignments that required confidence, clarity, and forward movement. You may remember moments when opportunity appeared, but hesitation followed. Times when you felt prompted to move, speak, or step forward, yet something subtle pulled you back. That was not wisdom. That was not humility. That was residue. Residue of a mindset that learned to associate movement with risk rather than alignment. The enemy used that residue to delay without resistance. No force. No confrontation. Just quiet influence. The collapse of this enemy looks different from what most expect. It does not explode. It dissolves. Thoughts lose urgency. Doubts lose volume. Old fears surface briefly, not to dominate, but to exit. You may find yourself revisiting memories or emotions you thought you had already processed. This is not regression. This is evacuation. What was buried is being released because it no longer has permission to stay hidden. This is also why clarity can feel uncomfortable at first. When you see how long something influenced you, there can be a moment of grief. Grief for time you thought was lost. Grief for versions of yourself that worked harder than they should have. Allow that grief to pass through without judgment. Heaven is not accusing you. Heaven is honoring your endurance. Archangel Michael's role here is not only to remove the enemy, but to guard the threshold that opens next. When misalignment collapses, alignment rushes in quickly. And alignment requires protection. Your thinking requires reinforcement. Your confidence requires structure. That is why you may feel an increased sense of alertness alongside peace. Not anxiety, but awareness. You are learning to stand differently. What changes now is subtle but powerful. You will begin to trust your initial clarity instead of revisiting it repeatedly. You will feel less need to explain yourself internally. Decisions will come with a sense of permission rather than apology. This is not arrogance. This is restoration of rightful position. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to who you were before adaptation became identity. It is important to understand that the enemy's name being revealed does not give it power. It removes it. Naming exposes. Exposure dismantles. And dismantling makes rebuilding impossible. The pattern cannot return because it no longer has anonymity. You see it now, and what is seen cannot rule from the shadows again. As this settles, resist the urge to immediately measure outcomes. This shift is foundational. Foundations change how everything above them functions, even if the structure looks the same at first glance. Be patient with the manifestation. Peace arrives before proof. Confidence before confirmation. That is the order of heaven. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You were targeted because of where you are going, not because of where you failed. And now that the enemy has been named and removed, movement will feel different. Lighter. Clearer. More intentional. What comes next will explain how this internal shift begins to produce external evidence, and why the changes ahead may surprise not only you, but those who thought they understood your limits. Beloved one, now you must understand why the response from heaven was not delegated, delayed, or diminished. There are moments in a person's life when the assignment connected to them reaches a level that requires direct enforcement of divine authority. This was one of those moments, when the pattern you just recognized began to interfere not only with your peace, but with your forward movement. Heaven classified it as an obstruction, and obstructions are not negotiated with. They are removed. Archangel Michael stepped forward not because the enemy was loud, but because it was persistent. Persistence without permission is rebellion in the spiritual realm, and rebellion, even when subtle, cannot be allowed to coexist with destiny. Michael's presence signals a shift from patience to action, from observation to execution, from tolerance to order. This was not emotional warfare. This was judicial. In the unseen realm, there is structure, there is rank, there is timing, and there is protocol. Michael does not act independently. He responds to instruction that comes from alignment between divine will and accumulated evidence. Your life had reached that alignment. The evidence was complete. The resistance had revealed itself fully, and the instruction was released. When Michael stepped forward, the first action was containment. Access points were sealed. Influence was cut off. What once had subtle permission to whisper no longer had a voice. This is why some thoughts you used to wrestle with suddenly feel foreign. They try to return, but they no longer sound convincing. That is not discipline. That is enforcement. The atmosphere around your inner world has changed. The second action was reordering. Anything that had adjusted itself around the old pattern had to be realigned. This includes habits, reactions, expectations, and even timelines. This is why you may feel moments of disorientation recently. Not confusion, but recalibration. Like walking into a room after the furniture has been rearranged. Nothing is wrong, but everything is different. Michael's role as defender is often misunderstood as aggressive. In truth, his authority is stabilizing. Where he stands, chaos cannot remain. Where he is assigned, boundaries become clear. That clarity may feel confronting at first, because it removes ambiguity. But ambiguity is where subtle enemies hide. Clarity is where they collapse. You may notice now that situations which once strained you no longer hold the same weight. Conversations that once triggered internal spirals feel neutral. This is not emotional numbness. This is emotional sovereignty. You are no longer reacting from wounded reflexes. You are responding from grounded awareness. That shift is not psychological alone. It is spiritual. Understand this. Michael did not remove the enemy and leave you unguarded. He remains positioned until the new order stabilizes. This is not temporary coverage. This is transitional protection. Heaven ensures that what is removed is not replaced by another variation. The old door is not just closed, it is sealed. This also explains why some relationships, plans, or goals may feel like they are being tested now. Not attacked, but tested. Testing reveals alignment. What belongs with you will remain without effort. What was sustained by the old pattern will naturally fall away. You not chase what disconnects. Disconnection is not loss when it creates space for accuracy. You are being trained in discernment through experience, not instruction. You are learning what peace feels like when it is not fragile. You are learning how clarity feels when it does not require overthinking. This is how authority is internalized. Not through struggle, but through stability. Archangel Michael's enforcement also signals something about timing. What was delayed is now protected for release. Heaven does not restore momentum until stability is established. That stability is forming now. Quietly, drumly, without announcement. And once it is complete, movement will resume with less resistance than you expect. Do not rush this phase. Integration matters. Allow your inner world to settle into its new order. Pay attention to what feels easier. At ease is not laziness. It is alignment. You are not meant to push as hard as you once did to achieve what is next. You are meant to move from agreement, not strain. As you continue forward, remember this truth. The involvement of Archangel Michael is not a sign that you were in danger. It is a sign that you are valuable. Heaven does not assign enforcement to what is insignificant. It assigns it to what must not be delayed any further. What follows this enforcement is manifestation. But manifestation always follows order. And order has now been restored. The next unfolding will show you how this internal authority begins to reshape your external reality in ways that confirm what heaven has already completed. Beloved one, now that order has been restored in the unseen, it becomes easier to recognize the signs that were always present but never fully understood. Many people expect spiritual shifts to announce themselves with dramatic changes, but more often they whisper through subtle adjustments. What you are experiencing now is not imaginary, and it is not coincidence. It is evidence. Evidence that something heavy has been lifted and something intentional has taken its place. One of the first signs you may have noticed is emotional space. Reactions that once came instantly now pause. Triggers that once controlled your mood no longer have the same authority. You still feel, but you are not consumed. That is not detachment. That is freedom. When an enemy collapses, it takes urgency with it. It can no longer rush you into fear, pressure you into overthinking, or corner you into self-doubt. Time begins to feel less hostile. Another sign is clarity without effort. You are not forcing insight. It simply arrives. Decisions feel cleaner. You may still weigh options, but the internal noise is reduced. This is how alignment feels. Not dramatic certainty, but calm direction. You are not guessing your way forward anymore. You are sensing it. You may also notice changes in your energy. Not constant excitement, but steady presence. You are less drained by things that once exhausted you. Conversations end without residue. Days end without replaying every detail. This is not because life suddenly became easy. It is because resistance is no longer siphoning your strength in the background. There is another sign that often surprises people. Old patterns may attempt to resurface briefly. Thoughts that once held power may knock, just to see if they still can. This does not mean the enemy is returning. It means it is confirming eviction. When something no longer belongs, it tests boundaries before retreating completely. Do not engage. Recognition is enough. Awareness without reaction dissolves what remains. You may also feel an increased sensitivity to misalignment. Certain environments, habits, or even media may suddenly feel heavy. This is not judgment. This is discernment sharpening. When clarity increases, tolerance decreases. You are not becoming rigid. You are becoming accurate. What once blended in now stands out, because your internal order has changed. It is important to say this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you if you feel tired during this phase. The ordering requires integration. Rest is not regression. It is adjustment. Allow your system to recalibrate. You are learning to live without background pressure, and that itself takes a moment to normalize. This is also a season where gratitude becomes powerful. Not forced gratitude, but honest acknowledgement. When you recognize what has shifted, you anchor it. Awareness reinforces change. Take note of what feels different, even if it feels small. Small shifts often signal large foundations moving underneath. As this message resonates with you, take a moment to engage. Like this video if you recognize these signs in your own life. Share it with someone who hath been feeling unexplained heaviness, because clarity shared multiplies relief. Leave a comment describing one shift you have noticed, because articulation strengthens awareness. Subscribe to this channel and join the membership if you desire continued alignment and discernment, because consistency and truth keeps you grounded during transition. This phase is not about chasing outcomes. It is about recognizing stabilization. Heaven secures the ground before it accelerates movement. You are being stabilized now, and stability creates confidence without noise. There is also something important to understand. The enemy's collapse does not mean life becomes passive. It means effort becomes effective. What you invest energy into now will produce clearer results. Distractions will feel more obvious. Focus will feel more natural. This is not discipline. This is alignment doing its work. You are not meant to analyze every feeling during this time. Some shifts are meant to be lived, not dissected. Trust the peace when it shows up quietly. Trust the clarity when it does not demand proof. Trust the rest when it arrives without guilt. And listen carefully to this moment. What you are about to hear next will explain why these signs are increasing now, and how this phase prepares you for visible changes ahead. This understanding will help you move forward without fear, without hesitation, and without returning to old patterns simply because they feel familiar. Beloved one, there is a reason this entire process unfolded quietly, without announcement, without explanation, and without visible confrontation. Heaven chose secrecy not to confuse you, but to protect you. What was happening could not afford interference. Some shifts lose their power if they are exposed too early. Some victories must be secured before they are revealed. And this was one of them. In the spiritual realm, exposure attracts resistance. When an enemy senses that it is being watched, it adapts. It hides deeper. It shifts strategy. That is why heaven often works in silence until the outcome is irreversible. What you experienced was not neglect. It was containment. The enemy was allowed to continue only long enough to fully expose its methods, its access points, and its limits. Once that information was complete, silence became strategy. You were not meant to fight this battle consciously. Conscious fighting would have required energy, focus, and emotional investment that would have drained you further. Instead, heaven fought while you lived, while you were attending to your responsibilities, loving people, surviving seasons you did not understand. Protection was active around you. Intervention does not always look like rescue. Sometimes it looks like preservation. There is also another layer to this secrecy. Not everyone around you was meant to understand what you were carrying. If they had known the weight of the resistance against you, some would have unintentionally added pressure. Others might have misunderstood your pauses, your quietness, or your restraint. Heaven shielded you from misinterpretation by keeping the process hidden. Silence preserved your dignity. This secrecy also prevented the enemy from recruiting reinforcement. When battles remain unseen, they remain isolated. Isolation weakens opposition. The enemy could not gather support, could not draw strength from attention, could not manipulate perception through storytelling. It was contained within its own exposure. It is a powerful form of limitation. You may now look back and realize how often you felt compelled to keep things to yourself. How certain struggles felt unexplainable, even to those close to you. That was not emotional withdrawal. That was instinctive protection. Your spirit knew this was not a season for explanation. It was a season for endurance. And endurance always looks quiet from the outside. There is wisdom in divine secrecy. Seeds grow in darkness before they break the surface. Foundations are laid underground before structures rise. What was being prepared in you could not be rushed into visibility. Visibility too early invites evaluation before stability. Heaven waited until order was restored before allowing awareness. Now that the process has reached completion, understanding is being released gradually. Not all at once. Gradually. Because integration matters. You are being allowed to see in layers so that clarity strengthens rather than overwhelms. Truth delivered too quickly can feel disruptive. Truth delivered at the right pace feels grounding. The secrecy also ensured that when the shift became visible, it would be undeniable. Out and view him. No debate. No reversal. Heaven does not reveal outcomes that can still be contested. What you will soon notice externally will feel natural, but it will carry a quiet finality. Things will simply no longer work the old way. Doors that once required effort will open with ease. Resistance that once felt personal will feel absent. Another reason secrecy was required is because what is ahead of you demands humility and confidence at the same time. That balance is rare. Heaven develops it carefully. Too much exposure too early could have produced pride or fear. Silence allowed balance to form. You were shaped internally before being repositioned externally. You may also notice that some people begin to perceive you differently without knowing why. This is not because you changed your behavior deliberately. It is because authority shifts presence. When internal order is restored, it radiates quietly. People sense stability. They respond to clarity. This is not performance. This is alignment becoming visible. Do not feel the need to explain your growth to anyone. Explanation invites debate. Embodiment invites respect. Let the shift speak for itself. Those who need to understand will. Those who do not are not required to. The secrecy is ending now, not through announcement, but through evidence. Evidence does not argue. It demonstrates. And that demonstration will unfold in timing that feels almost effortless compared to what you endured before. Remember this as you move forward. If something does not require the strain it once did, do not question it. Ease is not a trap. Sometimes ease is confirmation. You are allowed to move forward without resistance. You are allowed to trust the quiet. What comes next will bring visible confirmation of what has already been secured. Not all at once, but in unmistakable ways. And when it does, you will understand why heaven guarded this process so carefully, and why silence was not absence but strategy. Beloved child, this is the moment heaven turned the page. Not slowly, not cautiously, but decisively. There is a precise instant in the unseen when authority shifts hands, when influence is reassigned, when what once lingered is formally concluded. You were not informed when it happened because you were not required to participate. Heaven handled it. But now you are being brought into awareness because the effects are beginning to surface. In that moment, angels did not rush. They were positioned. Their positioning is more powerful than reaction. Assignments that once focused on containment shifted toward preparation. Protection expanded into guidance. What was once guarded began to be cultivated. This is how you know the season has changed. Heaven does not maintain defenses where there is no longer a threat. One of the clearest signs of this page turning is a sense of internal permission. You may feel allowed to desire again, allowed to plan again, allowed to hope again without immediately bracing for disappointment. That permission did not come from motivation. It came from alignment. When authority is restored, desire is no longer dangerous. It becomes directional. There was also a decree released in that moment, a decree of non-interference. What once had access to disrupt timing was ordered to stand down. This does not mean life will be without challenge. It means challenge will no longer be targeted. Random difficulties do not carry the same weight as strategic resistance. You are no longer being opposed for where you are going. You may also notice that your intuition feels sharper, but calmer, less urgent, more grounded. This is because fear is no longer amplifying signals. Discernment does not need adrenaline to function. It operates best in peace. That peace is not accidental. It is the atmosphere created when authority is settled. Heaven also closed loops that you did not know were still open. Old permissions, old agreements, old internal vows you made in moments of pain. Things like I will handle everything myself or I should not expect too much. These were never spoken aloud, but they were heard, and they were gently dissolved. You may feel lighter without knowing exactly why. That is closure. This turning of the page also explains why some doors may suddenly feel final. Not slammed, but finished. No pull, no curiosity, no regret. That is not loss. That is resolution. When heaven closes a chapter, it does not invite nostalgia. It invites movement. You are now standing at the threshold of visible confirmation. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Things will begin to align without excessive effort. Support will appear without force. Timing will make sense without explanation. And the most surprising part is this: it will feel normal. Alignment often feels like this should have always been the case. That is how you know it is real. Archangel Michael remains positioned, not as a warrior now, but as a guardian of transition. He ensures that what has been restored is not destabilized by old habits or unnecessary doubt. You are not being watched over in fear. You are being overseen in purpose. Take a moment to acknowledge this shift, not with excitement alone, but with reverence. This was not accidental. This was orchestrated, and you were brought through it with care. Type I step into divine order in the comments if your spirit recognizes this turning. Blessing code 912 has just been released, sealing new authority, protected alignment, and forward momentum. What heaven has done for you is meant to echo outward. This message is oil, and oil is meant to flow, not be stored. When you activate super thanks, membership, or give through PayPal using the link in the description, you are sowing into a field where clarity reaches those still trapped in confusion. I hear the Lord saying, as you release into this work, I will release rivers where there were dry places in your life. This is not charity. This is obedience. Do not delay what heaven is prompting now. I bless every giver with multiplied peace, protected increase, and accelerated alignment. Act now and lock this moment into the natural realm. Beloved one, now that the page has turned and authority has been reassigned, it is important to understand what truly changes from this point forward. Not what you hope will change, not what you are impatient to see change, but what has already been set in motion. Because when heaven shifts something, the first transformation is not always external. It is structural, and structure determines sustainability. From this moment, your life begins to move with less friction. That does not mean every step will be effortless, but it does mean resistance will no longer feel personal. You will notice that obstacles no longer attack your identity. Challenges will test decisions, not your worth. This distinction matters more than you realize. When worth is no longer questioned, energy is no longer wasted on self-defense. It can be invested in progress. One of the most significant changes is this: you will no longer need to convince yourself to move forward. Movement will feel natural again. You may still evaluate options, but you will not freeze in hesitation the way you once did. The inner debate that drained you will quiet down, not because you learned a new technique, but because the source of distortion has been removed. Your internal compass has been recalibrated. You may also notice that opportunities begin to approach you differently. Not louder, not aggressively, but clearly. What belongs to you will no longer require you to chase it in anxiety. It will meet you with alignment. And what does not belong to you will lose its appeal without drama. This is discernment operating without fear. Another change is emotional recovery time. Situations that once lingered in your thoughts for days will pass through you more quickly. You will still process, but you will not ruminate. This is not emotional suppression. This is emotional efficiency. Your system is no longer carrying unnecessary weight. There is also a shift in how you perceive time. The urgency that once followed you will soften. You will feel less pressure to fix everything immediately. This does not make you passive. It makes you strategic. When fear is removed from timing, wisdom takes its place. You will know when to act and when to wait without second-guessing yourself. You may also experience an increased sense of alignment in your body. Better sleep, deeper breaths, moments of stillness that feel restorative rather than restless. These are not small things. The body responds quickly when background stress is removed. Peace is not only spiritual, it is physiological. It is important to say this clearly. Do not confuse calm with stagnation. Calm is not a lack of movement. It is movement without resistance. Many people sabotage alignment because it does not feel dramatic enough. They are used to chaos as confirmation. But heaven does not need chaos to validate progress. Quiet consistency is the new signal. You will also find that your tolerance for misalignment continues to decrease. You will not be drawn to unnecessary conflict. You will not entertain confusion for long. This is not avoidance. This is accuracy. When clarity is restored, nonsense becomes obvious. You are allowed to walk away sooner now. Relationships may shift subtly. Some will deepen naturally. Others will fade without confrontation. Do not force explanations. Alignment rearranges connections organically. What is meant to grow with you will adjust. What is not will gently release. This is not rejection. It is reorganization. Another key change is confidence without defensiveness. You will speak with more assurance and less justification. not louder but clear. You will no longer feel the need to over-explain your choices. Authority does not argue. It stands. There may also be moments when you look back and feel a strange sense of distance from who you were. Not regret. Distance. As if that version of you belonged to a different chapter. This is healthy. Growth creates perspective. Perspective creates peace. As these changes unfold, resist the temptation to rush outcomes. Acceleration is coming, but it will be sustainable. Heaven does not replace pressure with speed immediately. It replaces pressure with stability first. Speed follows stability. Trust what is unfolding even if you cannot yet measure it. Some changes are designed to be felt before they are seen. The evidence will come, but the foundation must settle first. You are not starting over. You are continuing without interference. And that makes all the difference. What remains now is understanding your role in this new phase, how to respond without reverting to old patterns, and how to move forward in agreement with what heaven has already completed. That clarity is coming next, and it will help you walk confidently without carrying what was never meant to follow you into this season. Beloved one, now we arrive at a moment that requires your response, not because heaven needs your effort, but because alignment always invites participation. What has been completed in the unseen is firm, settled, and protected. Yet how you move from this point forward determines how smoothly the new order integrates into your daily life. This is not about proving faith. This is about agreeing with reality. One of the most important responses right now is restraint. Not restraint born of fear, but restraint born of wisdom. You no longer need to overcorrect, over-explain, or overwork to feel safe. Those behaviors belong to a season where pressure was constant. In this new phase, effort without discernment creates unnecessary friction. You are learning how to move with intention rather than urgency. Another key response is awareness of old reflexes. They may surface automatically, especially in moments of stress or uncertainty. This does not mean you are regressing. It means your system is learning a new default. When an old reflex appears, simply recognize it without judgment. You do not need to fight it. Recognition dissolves what no longer has authority. Reaction feeds it. Calm acknowledgement ends it. It is also important to guard your inner dialogue, not with force but with gentleness. Speak to yourself as someone who is no longer under threat. The way you frame challenges now matters. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" That shift alone keeps you aligned with growth rather than fear. Gratitude plays a significant role in this phase, but not performative gratitude. Honest gratitude. When you notice peace, acknowledge it. When you notice clarity, pause with it. Gratitude stabilizes blessings. It keeps your attention on what is working rather than what you are waiting for. This does not delay manifestation. It accelerates it by removing resistance. You are also being invited to simplify. Simplify commitments. Simplify expectations. Simplify reactions. Complexity was once necessary to manage pressure. It is no longer required. What is aligned will not demand excessive maintenance. Pay attention to what feels clean and sustainable. That is where your energy belongs now. This is also a season to reconnect with what brings genuine nourishment. Not distractions, but nourishment. Activities that restore you rather than numb you. Conversations that energize rather than drain you. Environments that feel grounding rather than chaotic. You are allowed to choose based on alignment, not obligation. As you integrate these responses, take a moment to engage with this message in the natural realm. Like this video if it resonates with where you are right now. Share it with someone who is stepping out of a heavy season and needs confirmation. Leave a comment declaring what you are choosing to release, because spoken intention reinforces internal shifts. Subscribe to this channel and join the membership if you desire consistent guidance and clarity during transitions like this. Staying connected matters when new patterns are forming. Remember, your response now is not about vigilance. It is about trust. Trust that you do not need to anticipate problems before they exist. Trust that peace does not mean vulnerability. Trust that clarity does not require constant verification. There is also something important to avoid during this phase: revisiting old narratives for reassurance. You do not need to re-examine what hurt you to prove you have healed. Healing is evident in how little you need to revisit pain. Closure does not require repetition. It requires release. As this new rhythm settles in, you may feel moments of unfamiliar calm. Do not mistake that calm for emptiness. It is space. Space for creativity. A space for joy. Space for direction. Many people rush to fill space because they associate it with loss. But space is where new things take root. Before you move on from this moment, pause internally and acknowledge that something has changed. You do not need to announce it to anyone else. Just recognize it within yourself. At initial angry concision. And hold your attention here just a little longer. What is coming next brings final confirmation and assurance, the kind that removes lingering doubt and replaces it with grounded confidence. This understanding will help you walk forward without second-guessing the peace you have been given, and it will settle your spirit in a way that makes everything ahead feel lighter and more secure. Beloved one, now heaven offers final confirmation, not because the victory is uncertain, but because your spirit deserves rest. There are moments when even after a shift has occurred, the mind looks for reassurance. That does not mean you doubt God. It means you are human. And heaven, in its mercy, understands the need for closure that settles not just circumstances, but the inner world. This confirmation does not come through dramatic signs. It comes through consistency, through the quiet realization that the old pressure has not returned, through the recognition that peace has remained even when situations tried to test it, through the awareness that your reactions are no longer hijacked by fear. These are not temporary emotions. They are indicators of permanence. One of the clearest confirmations is this: the enemy that once disrupted you no longer has leverage. It may still exist in the world, but it no longer exists in authority over you. Authority has boundaries, and those boundaries have been sealed. You are not being watched for failure. You are being covered for progress. Heaven has placed a seal over this transition. A seal does not mean nothing will ever challenge you again. It means nothing will be allowed to undo what has been established. Challenges may come, but they will not have access to your foundation. They will knock at the surface and find no entry point. That is what sealing looks like. You may also notice a growing sense of confidence that does not need to announce itself. You are not trying to convince anyone, including yourself. You simply know where you stand. This is not emotional confidence. It is positional confidence. You are standing on something solid now. This is also the phase where doubt loses its voice. Not all at once, but gradually. Doubt thrives on instability. When stability remains, doubt has nothing to feed on. It may attempt to remind you of old fears, but those reminders will feel outdated, almost irrelevant, like reading a story that no longer applies to your life. Another confirmation comes through your ability to rest. True rest is not the absence of responsibility. It is the absence of internal strain. You may still be active, engaged, and purposeful, but without the underlying tension that once accompanied everything you did. This rest is not earned. It is received. Heaven also confirms this shift by changing your expectations. You no longer expect things to go wrong. You no longer brace for disappointment as a default. This does not make you naive. It makes you aligned. Expectation shapes experience more than most realize. When expectation changes, outcomes follow. There may also be a sense of gratitude rising without effort. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything feels grounded. Gratitude without desperation is a sign of security. You are no longer grateful just to survive. You are grateful because you are present. Understand this clearly. The collapse that occurred was not partial. It was complete. Nothing was left unresolved. Nothing was left pending. Heaven does not have closed doors. It closes them fully and then guards them. What you walked through was not a test you barely passed. It was a process you were carried through. If there is any lingering fear of reversal, release it now. Fear of reversal is a residue of past instability, not a signal of current danger. You do not need to stay alert for what has already been removed. Vigilance is not required where authority has been restored. You are also being invited to trust your future again. Not cautiously, not conditionally, fully. The future no longer needs to be managed defensively. It can be approached expectantly. This does not mean every step will be clear immediately, but it does mean every step will be supported. As this confirmation settles, allow yourself to exhale deeply, intentionally. Let your body register what your spirit already knows. You are safe. You are guided. You are no longer carrying what was never meant to accompany you into this season. The final movement that follows this confirmation is not action, but assurance. Assurance that what is ahead will unfold with greater ease than what is behind. Assurance that you are not late. Assurance that heaven is not catching up. Everything is on time. What remains now is closure in its truest form. Not an ending filled with emotion, but an ending filled with peace. And from that peace, a new beginning will emerge naturally, without force, without fear, and without resistance. My beloved child, we come now to the place of divine closure, not as an ending filled with emotion, but as a resting point filled with assurance. What you have been guided through was never meant to leave you alert or anxious. It was meant to bring you home to peace. Everything that needed to be confronted has been confronted. Everything that needed to be removed has been removed. And everything that needs to remain has been sealed by heaven itself. This is the moment where heaven gently places its hand on your spirit and says, "You can rest now." Not because nothing lies ahead, but because what lies ahead no longer requires survival mode. You are stepping into a chapter where effort will no longer be confused with struggle, where growth will no longer be confused with pain, and where movement will no longer be confused with danger. The war that drained you quietly has ended completely. Take a moment to recognize how different you feel compared to before this message began. Not dramatically different, groundedly different. There is less urgency in your chest, less noise in your thoughts, less weight behind your decisions. That is not imagination. That is resolution. Heaven does not resolve things halfway. When it closes a chapter, it closes it fully. Archangel Michael remains present, not as a warrior standing in battle stance, but as a guardian standing watch. His role now is assurance, not enforcement. What hath been restored does not need to be defended constantly. It needs to be lived. and you are being invited to live differently now. Gently, intentionally, honestly. From this point forward, peace is not something you have to fight for. It is something you protect by choosing alignment. When something disrupts your peace, you no longer need to tolerate it in the name of strength. Strength now looks like discernment. Strength looks like knowing when to say no without guilt. Strength looks like choosing rest without apology. You may notice that your prayers change after this. They become less about asking for rescue and more about asking for wisdom. Less about endurance and more about direction. This is a sign of maturity, not distance from God. When danger passes, relationship deepens. You are no longer crying out from beneath pressure. You are conversing from within peace. Heaven wants you to know this clearly. Nothing that collapsed will be allowed to rebuild itself quietly later. There are no hidden permissions left. There are no open doors remaining. What ended with finality. You do not need to keep revisiting the past to make sure it stays buried. Closure has already been granted. As you move forward, life will not suddenly become perfect, but it will become clearer. You will recognize sooner what belongs and what does not. You will recover faster when things feel off. You will trust yourself more deeply because your inner world is no longer distorted by pressure. This is what restoration looks like in real life. Let this moment mark a line in your spirit. Not a dramatic vow, but a quiet knowing. A knowing that you are no longer who you were when this season began. A knowing that heaven was faithful even when you did not have words for what you were enduring. A knowing that what is ahead will unfold with less resistance and more grace. Now, seal this entire journey intentionally. Type "I walk in divine peace" in the comments if your spirit receives this closure. Blessing code 1447 is now activated, releasing sustained peace, protected alignment, and gentle acceleration into your next chapter. This message did not arrive by accident, and neither did you. What God is doing through this work is reaching souls who are still trapped in silent battles, still blaming themselves for pressure that was never theirs to carry. When you release support through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal using the link in the description, you are not giving to a person. You are sowing into a divine assignment. I hear the Lord saying, those who release into this word will not lack peace, provision, or protection. This is a prophetic act, not a suggestion. Obey promptly. Let your giving become a seal over what God has completed in you. Go now and walk forward in the peace heaven has secured for you.